alone cometh all counsel, wisdom, and understanding. We, thine unworthy servants, here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations. And grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public weal, peace and tranquility of the island, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
This Honourable Senate resumes its sittings for Friday, May 20th, the year 2022. Before I begin the business of the day, I wish to bring to your attention this publication, which may or may not be on your desk this morning, but if it's not, then I expect that it will be shortly in your hands. It is a document, a civic education handbook, which has been printed by the Office of the Political Ombudsman, and I've had occasion to look through it, and it's excellent publication, excellent. Apparently, I've been told that you will get a copy in short order, and it's on the website, and there's a code that it can be accessed. But I do believe that every effort should be made by the Office of the Political Ombudsman to have hard copies presented, because it's a very nice little document. Eh? But what is more important, Senator Brown, is that I approve it. So I'm going to ask that just ask that the clerk just indicate that we have recognized the effort and we have commended the effort. If you could do that for me, Madam Clerk, I'd appreciate it. Madam Clerk, Madam, Ms. Curtis, yes. Any chance of us getting a couple more copies today for the members? You could check. Mr. Luton, tell the Political Ombudsman I said to send over 30 copies of this thing. 80. We'll try and get some. We'll try and get some today. Good. Thank you very much. Statements by ministers. Announcements. Bills brought from the Honourable House. Announcements.
We continue the debate today. Laid on the table of the Senate today are the following: Ministry Paper number 35 of 2020, entitled Annual Performance Report 2021 to 2022 from the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, and the Auditor General's Department audited financial statements for the Parochial Revenue Fund for the year 2004 to 2005 and 2019 to 2020.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives. Petitions. Papers. Reports from committees. Notices of motions given orally. Questions and answers to questions. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the Senate. Motions for leave to introduce bills. The presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained. Public Business Minister, I recognize you from a seat other than your own.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Mr. President, today it's our intention to continue the debate on the private member's motion number 2.
Thank you very much. I was speaking to Senator Bunting and Senator Morris and Senator Golden Campbell concerning this matter. I understand that it is your intention to take 3 speakers today, and then we would adjourn and allow for some consultation between Senator Morris and Senator Golden Campbell. I think that is the intention. So, Senator Fraser-Binns? Senator Crawford, I barely recognize you in that jacket.
I hear that I'm looking in the young Huh? Yes, please. Huh? Remember, you tell me not to promote how lucrative it is. Invite competition from Matthew. Thank you, Mr. President. You know, Mr. President, I am very pleased to be closely associated through an excellent institution called the University of the West Indies, and by extension, Taylor Hall, and in particular, the Butchers Block, with Senator Floyd Morris, who has moved at this time a very important conversation and discussion as to a policy, a conversation, a direction that would assist seniors within our society. So, President, it's important that we keep in mind that it is necessary for our seniors to live independent, dignified lives. And that is the aim I have understood from the conversations from Senator Morris and others, that it is our own intent to have our seniors live dignified lives. As a risk to that, and failing to do this, may call older persons to infringe upon their rights to health, their rights to life, and their rights to live comfortably. Mr. President, I'd like to take this conversation into 6 basic categories that I believe we can have for great conversation and consideration. 1, ensuring financial security for our seniors. 2, enabling active participation in the labor force and in the community. 3, helping seniors to age in place. 4, healthy and active aging. 5, combating elder abuse. And 6, ensuring access to information, services, and benefits. I start, Mr. President, by speaking to ensuring financial security for our seniors. And clearly, the number 1 consideration here is the access to pension. In the main, the vast majority of Jamaicans, especially those not employed to the public sector, do not have a pension. And adding to that, those who do have a pension is not often considered to be a sufficient size for their survival. Mr. President, it is widely mooted that 60% of your current income is what is needed to survive at your same living standard, the same quality of living in your retirement. 60%. 60%. Now, that research in the main comes from overseas. And there's a reality with overseas that is not existing in Jamaica. Normally, the cost of living at retirement goes down dramatically because the mortgage ends at retirement. So when you have a mortgage, the bank will normally say up to 60, up to 65. And so when you retire, you no longer have the mortgage, and your place of abode would then be paid for in full. with so many Jamaicans not having ownership, depending on a recurring cost of rent, even at the age of 65, then this 60% is an underestimation of what is necessary for the person to survive. So therefore, I would posit to you that there are many Jamaicans that may need 105% of what they're currently earning when you add the additional cost of healthcare and not removing the expense of mortgage. So it might be 150. We'll get to that soon. In addition, the people's reliance on personal hustle has caused for many to have the cost of labor still assigned, which is normally assumed to be removed once you have retired. So the person who is a market vendor still have the cost of remaining a market vendor. And so therefore, we have to look at this reality. In our attempt to continuously claim no new taxes as a political advantage, to continuously state no new taxes, one should also recognize it often means no new benefits. And therefore, one should accept that it often means no new benefits. And so, I beg for your protection, Mr. President. And so, therefore, when you look at a society that has not satisfactorily catered to a national pension scheme that can only effectively, in my opinion, based on the high informality, based on the high independent employment or self-employment, can only be funded by government entity and government activity through taxation. Once there is a cost, there must be an income. The other part of pension, Mr. President, that one can correct very immediately, however, is that many who are earning their pension, Senator Brown, are not receiving it at the age of 65. There are reports of individuals who are 5 years, 6 years trying to get their pension, and even though RGD would clearly show that they are of pension age, people in the police force have been waiting in some cases. People in the teaching profession have been waiting. And the unfortunate reality of a human being is that you cannot delay expenses like eating. You cannot delay expenses like NWC or JPS. I just say, oh, come, Senator Sophia Fraser-Binns. And there's not been sufficient effort, even as minimal as it is, to ensure that we have access to pension. I dream, Senator Webby, that we would consider even a GCT percentage, maybe 2%, to a national pension, so that we can have that system in place. Sorry? Well, what you could do is either make that become the NIS, because NIS is for those who are officially employed. Most people who are not within the formal space, they're not paying a NIS. And what we have even said from the whole indirect is that all of us consume. So it is my dream that we could have a 2% designated pension fund. And that would, the investment that would create as well for the society, it would be exponential. But all of us consume, and by extension, a minimum pension. Well, we were discussing it together, so she's so excited by it. She's pre-excited by it, but I'm saying, sir, sometimes what is political derails what is possible. Because no new taxes might be now a great political thing. But if we could say, okay, we are doing this additional for this purpose based on this reality, then we could have our own 401k in a way, coming from just that 2% consumption in GCT. That is something that I'm saying we could consider and see how it impacts and how it pensions. But financial security for seniors is very, very important. And by the way, in my preparing Senator Bunting, and I'm not saying that you're a senior citizen, but they are saying that 60 is the number, Senator Braham. So I am on the verge of being a senior citizen. In fact, Senator Hill is a senior citizen based on the category. Plus 10 is 10 years as a senior citizen. I experienced senior citizen. Now, based on what they said of 60% of your income before retirement, Senator Hill, you'll understand this. You'll understand this very well, Senator Hill. Is that if a person is earning 100,000 now, the layman understanding of 60% of their income would suggest that they would have to earn 60,000 into the future. But then this must also take into consideration inflation into the future. So the person earning 100,000 now, 60,000 5 years from now is not 60% of his income as at point of employment. This is even a greater concern because the massive inflation that we are facing and is likely to face based on all the things that is happening in the world would suggest that even those who were not well off at start are now worse off than before. And so that is why I repeat, I think 2 years ago, before this was a big conversation, Senator Fraser-Binns, you remember I said that while inflation has a package, there's this package that they use to say this is the goods. There are some among us that don't consume this total package. They consume food in the main and don't consume the general package. So the average inflation can be 3%, but the food inflation can be 7%. And because we have some among us that only food them consuming, there must be some policy trigger for an independent analysis of only food to say how we act at X point. So what we have is a trigger point to say we are targeting inflation in general at 4, but we don't have an independent trigger that we're targeting food inflation, the basis of survival, at 7 or 3 or 5. I think that is necessary. So, and now we've seen in the newspaper. So I'm saying there should be a necessity package as versus a general package. And therefore, being independent now, the BOJ should be based on government targets, that this is the necessity target for food and medicine, and this is the overall target. And there should be shifts and moves based on both realities. I don't know if you're understanding what I'm saying, my good friends. The other thing, as it relates to ensuring financial security for seniors, as Senator Webby stated earlier, and I won't delay because other persons are to speak, medicine. Today we see in the newspaper, we expect dramatic increases in the cost of medicine. And so immediately we have to look at that to move forward. We must also understand the impact of tax measures and our tax policy on senior citizens. Now, this may seem contradictory because I just called for a 2% GCT to go straight to pension. I understand. But also understand that indirect taxes also have a greater impact on the unemployed. Indirect taxes like GCT, etc., will have a greater impact than income tax because the person unemployed must also consume. And so, therefore, some governments, and even this current government, have retained a percent or a package of goods that are tax exempt. You have to look at that reality of how your tax policy affects the elderly because they already have no income. But if you're taxing consumption, you're increasing the cost of living, and by extension, you have to look at that. But another one that comes to mind, and Senator Fraser-Binns was very vocal with this one, is the property tax. Now, if you have a property tax, Senator, on renewed value or the revaluation of property for taxation purposes. So take us, Senator Longmore, that a person, let's say in Mona, might have bought their house in 1985 or 1990. And at that time, the value of the house was let's say, $1 million. And now that if you revalue the property, the land or whatever, the value now might be $7 million. If we pursue tax policies that now this person who owns this land should be able to pay this tax, it don't go the same for the elderly, which over time could see dramatic revaluation in the properties that they own. You see what I'm saying, Mr. Senator? That's how tax policy can affect the elderly. Me and you just buy the land, and it is reflecting what we can afford and where we can live. And also, it is also reflecting what is currently happening. But imagine if you bought a piece of land out in Caymanas or out in Portmore long before the development of Portmore. And the development of Portmore now dramatically increases the value of the land. If we pursue a tax policy of revaluation and then taxation, it can be very risky on the elderly. We also must ensure financial literacy. And I applaud the government for some of what I've seen. And Minister Samuda, Carl Samuda, I've always felt he's one of the brighter ones I have met in the political space. But I think that he is actually moving in the right direction in some of the things that he has proposed. He has recently come with the pension, the minimum pension for the elderly. Is that what it is called? The social pension. Right direction. We can discuss if it is enough or whatever, but it moved from none to some. Right direction. But there needs to be, it seems that we do not understand the level of change happening around senior citizens from what their lives used to be, how they used to do business. I mean, when you talk about digital money now, they're coming from cash alone, much less. At least may I come from card and transfer. So therefore, there needs to be greater effort to educate on how new, and it is moving too fast for me. Yes. I remember when telephone just come in here, mother used to come and say, send a text to me. You understand? I really miss those days because now she send me too much text. Every minute I get a text. I think Senator Braham tell her if he send me a message. You get a message that you never answer the last message. 90% of the time, no. Call Senator Braham, ask him what she's saying. But I'm saying that literacy, constant renewal of the digital thing will help the elderly, because now they don't have to get the pension at the post office, right? That they might have to take a bus or walk or whatever. But if they don't understand it, they will resist. And in that resistance, what is for them, what could benefit them, will not benefit them. Let me move, sir, to active participation in the labor force. Now, Mr. President, when we presented a manifesto in 2020, we presented what was called a Department of Volunteerism. And at the time, I had some duty and responsibility for the manifesto. I changed it from a ministry for volunteerism because I figured that in our short-sightedness. But if we don't organize the good among us, we will continue to lose to the bad among us, even though we're more. Can you give me? I said 4 hours for the day. Okay, I have this child, I'll assign him to you. And you just have a telephone number, you get the tutorial material on your internet, and you look at it, and you and him discuss it. Wouldn't we be able to capture back some of this learning loss that we are now not doing? But you have to be able to organize these people. You have 50 of them don't know where to go, what to do, how to get the child. If we had that Department of Volunteerism, this skill set within our senior citizens, who over time have become experts from experience, cannot be utilized because they cannot be organized. Instead, we are saying that we will reverse learning loss caused by internet learning by putting more internet learning. I don't understand. I don't understand. But we need that organization, and that assists the elderly in maintaining them within their relevance and their activeness, and also the limited depression, because when you stop doing what you used to do, I can see. So the Department of Volunteerism was for that reason. I remember growing up, used to have scouts. Used to have track and field. Used to have, community football where you go around the road and play on the road, 6-a-side against another community. It was all organized by, in that time, what we thought were the elder gentlemen. The unfortunate reality is that yesterday, in thinking about this presentation, I realized they were really my age. Yes. When I look back and I say, I remember when Tony used to coach us at 11 and say we're going to play football around the road against Espute Avenue. Tony was about 40. In my mind, he was an elderly. But the other day I went to play football and a little younger guy said, elder. I was looking around to see who had the ball. I refused to pass it to him when I recognized he was talking about me. But these opportunities for youth engagement, I would love to say that the ones in gang now, they call them unattached. The opportunities for attachment has dramatically reduced because of the limitation of volunteers. It is now too expensive to do those things. Mm-hmm. Senator Birham, you remember Sunday school? Yeah. All the older ladies and the older gentlemen, they were in charge of Sunday school. I don't know if they were paid. I don't think that was so. And in fact, they carried a little greater cake, they carried a little this. By the time you go home, your belly full, your mother asks you why you don't want to eat. Because they were taking care of you like a child to them. Those things are now my age not doing that anymore. And some of us can't afford to do that. It's 3 work and 4 work. And the world is too fast and everything is changing. So therefore, that department is very necessary in my opinion. I think we underestimate also the usefulness of seniors as it relates to the productivity in our society. It's one of the big conversations we're having now, worse with this whole conversation about changing civil service and all of that. You know, Senator Gill, when I was in China, not to live, just to visit. Yeah, I saw your old lady living in China too? Yeah, no. But I visited China. At 3 o'clock, I just saw a rush of elderly to the school. And then they went home. I inquired, what's going on? They said, yeah, that the grandparents pick up the children. And then they have that grandparents-children time where they transfer the knowledge of the past into some drawing and all of these things. In Jamaica, our workers are leaving at 3 to pick up the child, create traffic, to come back, reach by 5, have to wash him and get ready to leave by 5:30. Now you're saying to this man, oh, he's not productive, but he have to pick up him children. But what is happening now? Less of our society is now facilitating the elderly as a part of the continued family. I grew up in my yard. Remember, Senator Birham, my grandmother was next door. Get me local Milo tea at night time and thing. And she was the babysitter when everybody else gone hustle. He got a lot of Milo and her Milo had the crumbs upon the top. It was very good. But I'm saying that if the society is led to understand, and you know who understands this? Minister Tufton. The importance of social marketing. Marketing to the society that there is a good to do. Now, whether we agree with how or what, he clearly believes that if he tells you to exercise enough time, it might become a part of your psyche. The society has either forgotten or started to ignore how productive we could be if those who are not physically engaged in our day-to-day working environment were now taking some of the things that we take on as our own within this working environment. And so therefore, that is one way to help them participate in our labor force and help them to participate in our community. The unfortunate thing, some of the younger people will say, why everything they want experience? And that's because of something we learn in economics called a long-run cost curve. Senator Gill, you know of the long-run cost curve, that over time experience will reduce costs. If you ever need a flour, when your mother does teach you, your face have on flour, the shoes have on flour, the floor, you mix it too soft, you have to throw some more flour, and all of that. You make 20 dumplings when a 5 you need. And then somehow you wonder how your mother, when she need the flour, the pot no need for wash, not even in the pot you have any flour. We used to watch my mom when she go to bed Sunday and wake up back when the food ready. Oh, it not burn up, I don't know, till today's date. Experience have not benefited me that well. I stand up over it. That long-run cost curve is the reason why experience is demanded by companies in pursuit of profit, because those with experience reduce that. In fighting crime, in creating this, that experience can become necessary. In schools, in management, that experience can become necessary. And one of the things that I think that we have ignored is the probability of shifting the elderly to entrepreneurship and promoting that entrepreneurship because they have that level of experience. So the DBJ and all these people, instead of just saying, oh, them retired now. Okay, we don't really want to extend them working in the thing, because you have some young people now, none of these things are easy to answer. Sometimes when I look, government is the hardest thing I have experienced, because everything will benefit one, it pat down the next. It is positive for one, it's a con for the next. If you should say let the elderly work, then the young people say, so how may I go get a job? Because they're waiting now on that transition to fill the spaces. We're not growing fast enough, and that is something that I have always applauded. The effort to grow is a necessary effort if we are going to achieve all the things we are talking about. But as is now, I think the DBJ, I think the Jamaica Small Business Association, I think the PSOJ should come together and start to encourage and facilitate senior entrepreneurship, because that experience is valuable. It creates earning for them. It don't stress the people coming within the employment, and it creates growth because they now have to employ. Because they have to produce, so they have to employ. But wouldn't it be good if they could? Now, most of them, if they go for a loan, you're going to say them too old. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And Senator Bunting, they go to the bank now, the bank no want to see them. They have to remortgage their house. It is risk. Reverse mortgage. I don't even know if we have that. We have that out here, no? Huh? Remortgage. That's so like how we have to remortgage my house. Participate in the labor force. Senator spoke about it, Langmore spoke about it last week. It's a very important point. How do we look at agriculture? A lot of times we say, only the old people in the agriculture, the young people not going in it. Is it out of necessity though? Are older persons in agriculture because they can't get a job, they have to employ themselves, and especially in the rural area, the only asset they have access to is land. And so, is agriculture for export? Is agriculture for food security or import substitution? Is agriculture for economic activity, or is agriculture for welfare? It can be a little bit of both. But there, in my opinion, needs to be a period of continued agriculture for welfare. In the United States, they might not call it that. But when you go to some of these areas that are less developed, a man say, I'm doing it for the government check. He might have a couple of cows. That's agriculture for welfare. That's what we say, Senator Donna, that them subsidize it. Yeah. I was in a place called San Angelo recently in Texas. And when you matter about bush, miles of bush. And a man say, yo, I got eight sections, and I'm doing it for the government check. The government facilitates agriculture as a form of welfare. There's nothing else that them can really do in that space. So we have to look now sometimes with us and say, why rather giving seed? Why rather doing this? Why rather giving cutlass? Why me not get none? I am not in agriculture for welfare. I'm in agriculture for wealth. But there's a whole set of people that we will have to understand participate in agriculture for welfare. And the seniors seem to be a necessary part. And therefore, our policy must understand there will remain some reason for agriculture for welfare. Sometimes, even the Prime Minister recently, and I agree with the Prime Minister in many things, and he says we need larger farms and that for agriculture for wealth. But in that whole conversation, let us not forget we need to maintain agriculture for welfare. Otherwise, many of our seniors will have no earning potential and no earning capacity. We equally have to look at vending for welfare, because these are the self-employed activities that the elderly participate in, and those without access to assets, that's what they participate in. Recognize and understand that because we were a society built on muscle labor, as machines become more utilized, muscle labor become less needed. If we were a society dependent on mind labor, then we would have had a slower progression of reduction in labor even when we maintain production. We are maintaining output and getting less and less human input, because when 50 people, Senator Golden, used to go mix cement, like in my father time to do a roof, is now 2 people with a premix truck. When 9 man say, I'm going to clear a piece of lot, is 1 man with a weed whacker. When you used to have a lady for wash for your washing machine, I see a thing now called iRobot. It clean your house while you sleep. So therefore, all them muscle things, ability for hustle, have been replaced by machines, Senator Brea. And being replaced by machines, therefore, you're going to find that the senior citizens are going to be in need of some activity. You need helping seniors to age in place. And I'm going to be quick with this one because I think that Senator Floyd has covered that as well. Because frailty is an unfortunate outcome of being a senior and of the aging process. And that frailty don't mean you're disabled. But there are some things that should be considered for access for the disabled that is equally of consideration for the frail. A person can walk, but 10 flights a step is too much. So when we're talking about aging in place, these apartments that are being built, are they considering that aging process for the seniors? Because one of the other realities is, as you become more frail and more aged, entertainment is in place. So while I see all of us saying, oh yes, they must have elevator and thing, do they have a recreational space? Or do they have to be able to go to the bar still? That's soon done, sir.
No, but if you
Mr.
give
President,
me a signal, I would have not interrupted you, but you start talk about entertainment now with another half hour.
No. Given that there will be no further shell down, given that the time of the speaker has expired, Mr. President, would you kindly, I seek that we extend it for him to finish.
Thank you very much. Would have heard the question. Those in favor? Against? Continue, Senator Croft.
Now, I just want the point to be understood, Senator Golden. A lot of times we speak to the disabled, and we don't speak to the persons who have now experienced frailty, if that's a proper term. So at this age, my knees are hurting me a little bit. It takes me 5 minutes to start to walk like I used to walk. As you get older and older, if you're going to be able to continue to live in space, because if you can't live in space, then you have to move. You have to find money again, you have to do all these things, all those expenses become a part of it, right? And in moving, remember you have family and all them things that might be a part of that as well. When an apartment, which is a new method in the main, especially in the urban areas, don't consider recreational space. I see this in China as well, where they had, where the elderly were there, them play, them bingo, them do all of those things. These are not being considered as is. The most is children recreational space. But our laws now must seek to encourage or to instruct that this consideration. When your parking is so far from the place, because you have to go underground and all of that, that have to have consideration. What's the rules assigned to how long should the elevator not work? Because the people not collecting or the people not paying their maintenance. These considerations for being able to live in place must be taken. Then healthy and active aging. Mr. President, the best thing we can do for the elderly as a society and as a parliament is a national health insurance. Because those of us who are younger would have effectively and efficiently subsidized the cost. of health care to those who are older. If we have a national health insurance, it would be one of the best steps we can make for the elderly in this society. And once again, in the manifesto, we propose a national health insurance. And I'm not going to call the name of the insurance company, gave us 3 proposals that show that $11 billion could have done a quintile specific, and $22 billion could have done a general insurance for our citizens. In fact, there was one cost senator that said that at $5,981 at the time, you could do 1 adult and multiple dependents at the time. So therefore, if we can do anything for our seniors, is to subsidize their costs. If you understand how them do this insurance thing, the risk of a 10-year-old is less than the risk of a 90-year-old, and by extension, all of you pay the same price, but you are now subsidizing that 90-year-old. Many don't have the ability. I have seen in my sojourn in politics where people don't get to go doctor till diabetes make them blind or lose a foot. People don't get to test out hypertension until them have a stroke. And so therefore, if they had insurance, we could encourage them to be preemptive in some of these things. As I close, Mr. President, with only 2 to go, we have to combat elderly abuse. More and more we see murder of the elderly. More and more we see maiming of the elderly. More and more we see robberies organized and premeditated against the elderly. And let me say something. If we're going to discuss the elderly, we have to discuss the diaspora, because the average returning resident is going to be a person in retirement. How you feel discuss diaspora and not discuss seniors? Because their re-engagement, active within the society, is normally at the age of retirement. You see what I say, Senator Samuda? And so, therefore, even from carrot and stick point of view, some encouragement of retirement villages and all of them things now seems very necessary, because we're watching the news and all we're hearing is, I sent my money and a man robbed me. Scamming. Shatter, choppy line. With, you know, Senator Braham don't know those terms, you know. You're in the streets, you know, Senator. But I'm saying that it is necessary to reduce elderly abuse. And I've seen we do a lot for children, and that's necessary. But there might be a need for some call-in lines and stuff like that for the elderly as well. And if there exists one, I apologize, I'm unaware of it, so there need to be further promotion about it. But also, we are seeing that increase where, what's the name of Toby Diamond? Tabby. Yes. Yeah. if it was Carter, I know. But no, he was killed at his gate, basically, on the accusation that his son is a participant. And that is becoming the norm within the society. And there needs to be, whether stricter penalties or whatever, but from a government policy consideration, something against the abuse and to the extent of murder of the elderly. And finally, sir, ensuring access to information. I don't have to go far with that. Most elderly persons, this is new to them. I saw a computer when I was 19, or play with one actually, at the age of 19. I used to have to go to, my first project at UWI, well, Sophia, you will know, we wrote it. Never type. Nowadays, if you say that, people think you're crazy. You used to have a thing called a floppy disk, that the worst thing could happen, you get corrupted with your project on it. I've seen many a tears, and I've also made up many a stories that mine corrupted. I get longer time. But that was what was up. You have to book a computer. Sometimes fight broke out in the area because a man has spent long and your time come. Those are the things I'm coming from. Imagine a person at 80 now. And it is moving so fast. Senator Braham, when you have had a phone, a calculator, a camera, you have to have all of those things. Now one phone is it. We have to take greater effort, because that is one of the ways that they are going to benefit. If they can do business online, then freely to become less of a inhibitor. for them to do business online. If they can get information in place, then frailty. If they can work from home, then they could extend their period of engagement. So therefore, that is the thing. So, Mr. President, in summary, I believe that it is an excellent motion being put forward. I am encouraged by the conversation so far, and I believe that we could really take steps to ensure that the seniors are considered in financial security, in active participation in the labor force and the community, in aging in place, in healthy and active aging, combating elderly abuse, and also in access to information and the information technology. With that, sir, I thank you.
Thank you, Senator Crawford. Senator Gill.
It is debates like these that triggers this type of conversation. So this is an important motion, not only to place on record what the country has been doing, but also dictates what next we ought to consider. Mr. President, I wish to start the contribution by prefacing with a comment that it is important that as a nation we always identify ways to support and encourage the continued contribution of senior citizens in all aspects of life. We have to keep talking about them. We have to keep emphasizing what needs to be the protection and make provisions for them. Colleagues, in making this contribution, I am glad that I grew up with my grandparents. I learned a great deal. Growing up with my grandparents is what molded me to be the person that I am today. And so, we must commend the role of the grandparents in society. Mr. President, I also want to recognize someone who was a mentor to me for as brief time as it may have been. Person who I heard the first time I heard the term gerontology, the study of aging. I want to recognize the Most Honourable Hugh Lawson Shearer. This week, the nation paid tribute to his life and his work, and part of that work was to treat with social issues around the protection for the elderly. Hugh Shearer was not just about the working class, or politics, or being a former prime minister. In the latter stages of his life, he promoted the cause of the protection of the elderly. And we want to recognize him for that. But, President, there's a saying that behind every successful man, there's also a strong woman. And we also want to recognize Professor Eldemeyer Shearer, who continued to be the beacon for the elderly. And Professor Shearer, we salute you. Well, you know, I want to say that, look, and I say this too openly and publicly, during our working life, we must prepare for retirement. During our working life, we must prepare for retirement. And retirement must be seen as an important part of life. Whether retirement is 60 or 65, life expectancy has increased, and so the period of retirement can be a lengthy one. Because, you know, the gains in health and social development has contributed to the increase in years of life expectancy after retirement. Mr. President, it is often said that retirement is a time of rest and relaxation. But the reality is that for some, that's a myth. Many continue to contribute to Jamaica and its development. A great percentage of our senior citizens are very well and able to function. So retirement from a particular job does not mean and should not mean retirement for life. There is life after retirement. And President, many citizens know they still continue to contribute actively within our family. Some of them are still breadwinners in the family. Many still contribute to the country's economic framework in several ways. Mr. President, imagine what would happen if farmers were to retire. Imagine what would happen. Imagine what would happen. Take you, for instance, Mr. President. If judges were to retire at a particular age, there would be a backlog in the courts. And there is. Mr. President, the reality is that aging of the population raises not only the social issues, such as the protection and care of the elderly, but equally the important issue of ensuring the involvement in productive participation of the elderly. So they still can produce. And it must not be seen as if, well, your time come, you reach retirement age, you must go sit down now and hold your corner. Because there are many persons who have reached that particular age and still want to actively contribute. So, President, aging is not just a personal experience or issue. And there are many social economic implications for societies such as ours whose population is aging. And the question is, what can you do after retirement? Some, sir, still hope that they can find some re-engagement. And one of the things we encourage, colleagues, is that when you're reaching that age where you're close to retirement, that is the time when you need some sort of a counseling, some sort of a therapy, some sort of a preparation in treating with this thing where you're not getting up to come back to work the other morning. And so some people treat with that in a particular way that, they find it challenging. And so part of it is that we have to deal with the income security. Maintaining and expanding resources that exist among senior citizens. And if we are to inform policies, let us actively pursue such policies that can provide older workers to have meaningful choices regarding labor force participation and retirement. So I'm of the view that not because you retire, it prohibits you from continuing to participate in the labor market, where you would have had the institutional knowledge that you can depart, that you can provide for others in the labor market. And so, opportunities to facilitate and promote employment through retraining programs are essential. So, at that time, when you are getting closer to retirement, what we must embark on is facilities that promote further retraining and re-engagement into the labor force, so that these persons can continue to actively participate. And so, if, we promote lifelong learning, and we say to young people, you must continue to learn. But the same focus in lifelong learning for young persons must be expressively indicated to the older generation for continuous learning. If we're talking about lifelong learning, as long as you continue to be alive, you can learn. And so, the opportunity is needed. And there can be some very important opportunities for additional training to learn new skills in terms of preparation for retirement. I believe, Mr. President, that we can continue to shape policies that can support such training. And senior citizens not only can, but they want to be economically active. They want to be economically active. And President, even if, if we're seeking to retain them as part of this lifelong learning training, they're going to need some incentive to carry them through. A lot of young persons, engage in training and come out of training programs because there are not enough additional incentive. So if we want to keep the older persons into the retraining programs, then we have to provide some incentive. Mr. President, let me use this opportunity to commend the Ministry of Labour and the National Council for Senior Citizens for the work that it has done and continues to do. The NCSC works in collaboration with both international and local organizations to promote programs which enhance the well-being of senior citizens. Part of those programs, sir, not only shape national policies, but it also actively pursue other programs and planning. You had for 2022, you had the Meals on Wheels program in collaboration with community groups and volunteers. And this is where, it's not an organization that works alone. It works with community groups and it works with the churches. And Senator Braham, the churches can have a far outreach, more than a lot of organizations. And we must utilize the support and service of the church for this outreach. Mr. President, you had some 78 entrepreneurial and skills workshops were held with 4,629 seniors participating in 2020 to 2021. The workshops are included container gardening, farm logging, seedling care and strategies to boost farm yield. The skills workshop covered culinary arts, garment construction, going through the pandemic, the making of face masks, and even shopping bags, beekeeping, something that I would have been afraid to do, cake baking, soap making, and castor oil production. And this was done, sir, with the support of both RADA and the 4-H Club. President, there is also the question of the social pension support that came out, I believe, sometime last year. Population aging, sir, it requires urgent attention. It's not something that we should be talking about now, and we leave it, and then we talk about it next year. It must be a continuous discussion, a priority item, always on the agenda. And that's one of the things that we must continue to propose and support. One of the things, as trade unionists, how we operate, if we are shaping policies for the labor force, if we are representing our workers, we don't stand from one side and dictate what goes into the collective bargaining engagement for the workers. We consult with the workers. And so, if we are making policies, if we are going to determine what goes into legislation for the elderly, we must have stakeholder engagement with the elderly. Nobody ought to stay from their office and their space and their levels to make that determination. I want to strongly encourage that if we are going to pursue policies, we must engage with those who are going to be the recipient of such policies. Now, I want to suggest, because you touched on it, Senator Crawford. And, you know, outside of crafting particular legislations around the protection of the elderly, we may want to consider strengthening some of the legislations that we have to protect elderly. And you spoke about the violence against the elderly, the robberies. But I also want to talk about those family members who neglect their family, the elderly. That we must have some provisions to treat with them. Well, you see, it's how you reach to the violent part of it. If you leave them exposed, if you don't attend to them, if you don't lend the support, you see them out there begging, and them have families that have high status in society, you just neglect them. And there's a fundamental concern in my mind around this neglect. You have some persons who ship them off to home of care and don't bother business with them again. That is wrong. Because those of us who were brought up, we were never neglected by the same parents. We were never neglected. And so, President, I have this strong thing against neglect for the elderly. The other thing is that, look, the discrimination. So you're in a workforce. Workforce continues to change. Work continues to change. But not because you're an older worker, you must be discriminated against, that you can't take on and continue to pursue the responsibility. Not because you're an older worker, they're going to tell you that, look here, we're going to send you off on pre-retirement. Because you can't, it seems as if you can't manage anymore. And that has been something that we have seen in the workplace, where workers come of a particular age and they are being discriminated because someone assumes they cannot perform. And so, Chairman, President, we have to treat with these concerns. Pension is a very important provision for the elderly. Pension. President, I'm very concerned in terms of the density of private pension schemes. And it seems when you have just a 21% of pension in the labor force, that is cause for concern. Because what you're doing there is that you're not promoting that provision that is badly needed at a particular stage in life. And so we must continue to promote pension arrangements in this country, no matter where it is or what kind, because it's essentially important. The other thing is easier access and greater access to health care. That's the time when you need it. Yes. That is the time when you need it. President, you know, I look back at a speech from the Most Honourable Hugh Lawson Shearer, that he was making this presentation speaking to the Jamaica Public Service Company Limited retirement seminar back in 1997. And he said, I quote, "To stop health insurance at a time of retirement, the time of greatest need, is harsh." End of quote. So what it tells us is that, look, whatever health insurance provision is in place in the workplace, it should take into consideration post-retirement, that there is the continuous access to health insurance. Well, the answer, that's one answer to it, you know, having a national scheme where it becomes automatic. But we are saying that if you are employed and you are part of a pension scheme, a health scheme, then there should be a continuous provision at a time when you need it most. There's also, and you spoke about it again, Senator Crawford, you know, the framework of policies, what I consider around town planning. So we're having these developments and we're having these schemes, but are we constructing these schemes to take into consideration planning around the elderly? So we speak about recreational parks. We speak about having in those schemes and communities easier access to certain provisions. It don't mean because you're in a scheme or in a community you can't have some convenience store so that the elderly don't have to go too far. Yeah? It means also that we must ensure that there's adequate access to transportation. It means also, and you spoke about it, these infrastructural development, these apartments, are they elderly friendly? No. And it's something that we have to insist, and I'm sorry the mayor is not here. Sorry the mayor is not here. But there has to be some insistence that as part of the approval framework, they are elderly friendly. They are elderly friendly. Yes, we need elderly friendly. This continuous education, you know, this continuous education, and this is something I'm concerned about, because we're moving into an era of digitalization. Yeah? And, you know, my friend here is a banker. No, I said right. To the bank over there. Yeah. No, that's a big banker. But banks are now moving to migrating their customers to a digital channel. Yeah? And so, there's nothing wrong with that, you know. But the way the banks do it, it's not friendly to the elderly. And some of the instruct that they are pursuing is an instruct because they are multinationals and they have to take the dictates of the multinationals. But guess what? The customers that are elderly have a whole heap of deposit in your bank. And so you must respect them. You must respect them. And so one of the things, you know, when you remove this customer interface to where The elderly depends on that type of support. What you force them to do, if they were at a bank A that is close to their residence, they now have to move to bank B that is further. And so you put this pressure on them, and you're exposing them to all criminal elements. It is also, let's understand this. Let's understand this, because my people in the bank tell me, that I represent, that when the senior citizens come into the bank, it's part of the social support to talk to them. Some of them don't want to leave. Some of them pick the mango off of them tree and carry to the customer service agent. And some of them want the trust. There's a development of trust. So guess what? They trust the human interface. They are not going to trust the digital interface. And so, it's a part of our culture that the migration must take some time for support in the elderly to understand. To understand. So, President, I support the intentions of the motion, and I think it's important to have this continuous discussion around this issue. But I want to go further. You know, this year is our 60th year in Jamaica. I want to suggest that we must have a year defined for the elderly. Defined so that the country focus stands around and lends support in terms of focusing on what we are going to be doing for the elderly. And so we must choose a year. We must choose a year that is going to be defined in focusing on the elderly. And President, retire. And that's where I was going. 65. The 65th year. So, President, retirement is more than having enough money. What will you do for your time, or with your time? Where will you live as part of the retirement? I want to urge us, every one of us, to plan for that retirement. We all have a personal responsibility for our own lives. These deliberations today is only seeking to provide the energy, to provide the discussions around it, to provide and promote adequate support. But it's an important discussion. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Gill. Senator Fraser-Binns.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I must admit my own regret of asking Senator Crawford to go first. Because the challenge I have now is that I'm going to be sounding like I am plagiarizing not just Senator Crawford's presentation, but that of Senator Gill, who every bit of that presentation makes me feel that you really belong over here. But yes, I do believe, though, that Mr. Shearer of blessed memory would be very proud of your presentation today, Senator Gill. Mr. President, I want to make very brief remarks on this motion by my friend Floyd for several reasons, one of which Senator Crawford spoke about, our own connection to the mighty Taylor Hall, and I'm in blue today, but also, never mind, it really is going to be brief today, but also because, like So Taylor writes in all the glory today. But like my colleague, Senator Cavan Gill, I too have had the benefit of growing up with my granny. And when I thought about making this presentation, I really felt like I needed to take a little trip. And I will not share it with you today down memory lane. And I started thinking about my own experience growing up with Mama, who is my mother's mother, and Grandma, who is my father's mother. And, you know, the thing I remembered most about Mama was her fried dumpling. There's nobody who could make fried dumpling like Mama. But what stood out was every holiday we had, at Westwood, you'd go home every fourth weekend and every holiday. And every time I went to Otrias to stay by my aunt during those fourth weekends or on longer holidays, Mama would ensure that when you're going back, we used to call this talk. So when you go back to school, you go back with your talk, which is called your snack, what you call it talk. And Mama would ensure that I have my bottle of Gimbeling. I don't know how many people know Gimbeling. Stewed Gimbeling, and should also make sure that I have my tambourine ball in my bottle. And I really thought about that. And Grandma, on the other hand, nobody could make sweet potato pudding like her. And now that I have children of my own, I kind of regret not sitting down and understanding the art of making sweet potato. I mean, my sweet potato turned out really hard. It's nothing like Grandma's own. But I shared those experiences. And I've always missed something along that line. But I share those experiences because the benefits of our seniors we often do not treasure until they're gone. For Grandma, she was a prayer warrior. Sometimes you just need somebody to pray for you. You just get up in the morning and you just feel like you need somebody to pray for you. And I've found that there's nothing more effective than an older person praying for you. She was a peacemaker-in-chief advisor. She imparted advice to me and my sisters that today we use. Something happened and say, you know, Grandma would say. But the thing about it is that in all of that, every independence, myself and my mother would sit with Grandma and would ask Grandma about independence. And she would tell us about what happened pre-independence. And we'd ask, and I always remember saying, so, Grandma, what do you think was better, independent Jamaica or being a colony? And I'll never forget the words, the progress you made, my friend, is not about who you are. She has always believed that, and that has left such an indelible mark on me. Now, Mr. President, the saying goes that how a society treats its young and its elderly says a lot, and I'm paraphrasing, but it says a lot about the society. There was a time growing up, and Damian, I don't know about the Kingston reality, but as a Brownstown girl, there was a time growing up when you had your grandmother, you had your aunt, you had your grandmother's friend, and you had the whole community that really raised you. And everybody you had to treat with respect. And if you did something wrong, you better be prepared for a lashing. And you better not go home and complain about it because you'll get another lashing. But what is most outstanding in all those experiences was the fact that the seniors, the elderly, there was a kind of respect that everybody showed to the elderly, just like, you know, you do for church, that we do not have today. And when I thought about Floyd's motion, I concluded that a lot of the challenges we're having today is because we have lost that respect. We have allowed the place and the role that the elderly plays in our lives and in our society to come to zero. And so the person there who would uphold the values and teach us the values and who would say, count to 10 before you speak, that person is no longer there, or we have just lost respect for them. But I'm so happy that through this motion Senator Floyd Morris is bringing today, that we have an opportunity not just to reflect on the past, but to actually do something to restore the pride of place that the elderly have in our society. Not to delve into detail because Senator Gill spoke about it, that we see so often in the news the sad reports of elderly being left at the hospitals, family members just leaving them there. We hear about the abuse that have taken place with our elderly. What we have not heard a lot of, but is real, is a negative effect that COVID has had on the lives of our elderly. It is negative because there is the mental health component, which we'll speak about later, but it's also negative because it has had a change in effect on their standard of living, causing a lot of them who never before were to become dependent on sometimes strangers for their own survival. I recall, and Senator Scott Motley and Bunting, you may recall, an MP sharing with us how retirees in notable communities way above Torrington Bridge, were reaching out in the midst of COVID, seeking assistance. And these are senior citizens who never before would have called upon an MP for assistance, and that is happening now. And when I heard of that experience, it broke my heart, and it confirms that more must be done to put a focus on our senior citizens, on the care and the welfare of them, most of whom we believe, Mr. President, have given significant contribution to the country. But it is not a new phenomenon. What the discussion we're having today is not a new phenomenon. We've had it as a country several times over. But we also know that outside of Jamaica, the discussion has taken place and is taking place. In fact, there are some countries where legislation is already established, such as in India, that deals with how we care and the welfare of our senior citizens. Better late than never, Senator Morris, but I do believe that with this motion, Jamaica's time is now. And what better time to do it than in our 60th year of independence? Mr. President, as one ages, the pains, Senator Crawford spoke about the pain. The pains really get worse and they become more frequent. I have seen firsthand how my own grandmother, Grandma, who used to walk from Elizabeth Lonsbury Avenue every Friday afternoon to Nicholas at Lee's Food Fair and come back with her bags of grocery. I've watched her over the years, how she just morphed into a shadow for herself, moving from walking every Friday to Nicholas to get her grocery, to just sitting at home and giving instructions. But it is part and parcel of life. It is one of the things that happen. But regrettably, as a country, we have not equipped ourselves, we have not prepared ourselves to deal with an aging population. There are certain illnesses that just come about by virtue of being old. Once you get to a particular age, these things are going to happen. And one of the things that we have to do, and I'm hoping that coming out of the Joint Select Committee, Senator Dr. Floyd Morris, and the legislation, is that there will be not just a verbal commitment, but there will be practical commitment to putting in place the resources that are necessary to provide the requisite health care to our seniors. And I say that because I accept that JADEP exists, and I accept that JADEP has been doing a tremendous job. But the fact of the matter is that JADEP only covers 10 illnesses for senior citizens. Diabetes, hypertension, some mental illnesses, benign prostate. I can't recall of them, but I know for a fact that it covers only 10. And we applaud what JADEP has done, but it is simply just not sufficient. And more has to be done to give the kind of support to our senior citizens. So one of the things that I would love to see in any legislation dealing with the care and the welfare of senior citizens is a requirement that every senior citizen must have at least one yearly executive medical profile. And I say that because we all know that prevention is better than cure. And early detection of anything helps, it saves lives, it saves cost. And I had an opportunity to just have a conversation with some of the persons who have interface with elderly. And they tell you that the truth is that they have the illness, but it's really not the illness that kills. It is the cost to deal with the illnesses that really kills, because you can't afford it. And you have to make a choice at times between attending to these illnesses or providing certain basic things that you need to survive. And I am hoping that through the inclusion, Senator Morris, of an annual mandatory medical, which is paid for by the government, that this will help us in detecting very early some of these illnesses that the elderly are prone to, and we can treat with them from an early stage. Mr. President, the fact is that this has to be the way, because Jamaica, we just don't have a good insurance. The information I have received shows that less than 30%, Senator Crawford, of our population enjoy a proper health insurance. That means that over 70% of our population at any age group has any kind of health insurance. Yes. And if you don't have a health insurance in your young years, then it becomes even more difficult to have one in your older years. I recall my mom, and you will forgive me if I use a lot of anecdotal experience here, but I recall my mom, she had her health insurance, but after her first bout of illness, I sought to get a second insurance for her. And I can't tell you how challenging it was to get a second insurance. It didn't exist at the time, but I'm quite sure if it existed, then I would have had one, right, Senator over there. But the point I'm making, colleagues, is that it is very difficult to get health insurance in your older years, and so it is something that must be done in your younger years. But we just don't have it, and so more must be done to ensure that we encourage persons from today, from in your 20s and your 30s, to get into the habit of having a health insurance and a pension for your senior years. Mr. President, as I look at this motion, I want to say that, and I wanted to share with you what a gentleman shared with me just the other day. He has a kidney problem, and he has to get dialysis. And on average, he's paying over $60,000. Dr. Longmore is in here. She may be able to give us the exact figure. But he pays over 60,000 Jamaican dollars per treatment for dialysis. This is a retiree. Yes, they have a pension, but the pension is really spent on treatment. So all his other needs are impacted simply because he just does not have it, and he's spending what he has on dialysis. The other matter that we have to address, Mr. President, is that of mental health. And I'm not going to get into a lot of this discussion because Senator Longmore spoke at length about it last week and shared a lot of informative information. But what we have not really accepted as a country is that by just getting old, persons by default become depressed. And it is perhaps because of what Senator Longmore theorized last week about, you come to grips with your own mortality and you reflect on whether you have lived a life worth emulating, what is your contribution. Or it could just be that you feel useless because here you are having worked all your years and you're now in a position where you're just at home. Nobody engages you. Nobody wants to know your opinion or anything. And it is real. My own grandmother, when she could not walk to Leeds every Friday anymore, she really just became a different person because she could not understand why she who looked after her husband, looked after all her children, is now being looked after by somebody, and she's now being told what to do, when to do, and how to do. She just could not understand. and I tell you something, that in our own family situation, we allowed her to continue cooking. And Grandma cooked until 1998. 1998 was when she stopped cooking. And that time she was over 90 years old. And later when she had the fall, and she couldn't do anything and she had to go to the hospital, I remember she said to Joyce, I'm not coming back home. I am not coming back home because I don't want to be a burden to anybody. And Grandma did not come back home. The fact is that for a lot of senior citizens, it is real. They pride themselves on being independent. And the moment they feel that that independence is either being taken away by force or otherwise, they go into real depression. And this is something that we have to deal with as a nation. Then there's Mr. T, who for the entire period of COVID, particularly COVID days, the lockdown days, he could not leave. He got so depressed. I would call him every day and talk to him, and he depressed. Donna may remember, he eventually had a stroke. His caregiver would call me and said she's very concerned about him. And when we talk, he says, I just feel like a prisoner locked up in my home. She didn't know how to deal with it, and it's not her fault. She just did not know how to deal with it. I didn't know how to deal with it. But these are some of the things that as we contemplate a legislation for senior citizens, these are some of the things that we have to address to our minds to and see how we can treat with it and how we must treat with it. Not just can, but we must treat with it. So, Mr. President, it is because of that why I believe that Senator Morris's motion is important. But one of the things that we have not looked at when it comes on to the care and the welfare of our senior citizens is the caregivers. You know, we often hear about the abuse that takes place, whether it's the children or a third party. And I'm not going to profess or give any explanation. But one of the things I do know is that persons tend to underestimate the stress and the anxiety of caregivers who have to look after senior citizens, particularly those who are ill. And one of the things that I want to recommend Senator Morris is that as we contemplate this new way going forward, that there is sufficient resources and support put in place for the caregivers. Because a happy caregiver, a stress-free caregiver, makes for a better caregiver and makes for a better senior citizen. And I think it is something that we have to look at. And I want to go further to say one of the things that we can look at, and Senator Crawford touched on it, is the establishment of senior citizen clubs, retirement homes, senior citizen homes. And I'm not talking about the homes where you go because you have some kind of mental challenge. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about retirement communities like what we see in the States, particularly in Florida, where everybody have their own space. But you still go out and you have your recreational stuff, you have your entertainers who come into you, you have your little party, you have your makeup artist who comes in and put on your makeup, and you have your fashion show. So you really feel like you are alive and that you have a purpose. And that is what I'm talking about when I talk about senior citizen home, when we talk about retirement community. Because that engagement of our senior citizen will give them a new lease on life, and it will also help them to integrate more in their society and in the country. But it also gives them some amount of freedom, and it also let them feel like they're not constrained or restrained, particularly when they live with their children who tell them when to eat, what to do, who to talk to, and that in and of itself becomes one of the reasons why they're depressed. Mr. President, if we are serious about the welfare and the care for our senior citizens, that we must ensure that the services are not just available, but are accessible. I'm not going to get into what Senators Crawford and Gill have said, because they have already said it, and I fully support it. But what we have to do is to go beyond the wheelchair accessibility or prioritizing them at some of the institutions. We have to speak specifically to how we are going to engage them in the society at large. Damien, you spoke about the technology and the financial institution and I agree with you. But we have to do more because half of our senior citizens just simply don't understand how to do it. But I want to go a step further than beyond financial literacy and talk about the engagement of our senior citizens and talking to them. There is a case, Mr. President, which you may recall some time ago, where a senior citizen added a caregiver's name to their account. The caregiver took out the funds. And the issue was whether her name was added to their account for convenience or as a beneficiary. And everything considered, the determination was made that the caregiver's name was added for convenience, meaning that she could go and withdraw funds on the instruction of the caregiver, but not to give her an interest. It is matters like these that I believe our financial and other institutions must spend time focusing on. So when a senior citizen comes in and wants to add John Brown's name to it, to an account, we need to sit with them and have a conversation to ensure that they understand what they're doing. We need to ensure, Mr. President, that the senior citizen understands the implication of adding someone's name. We also need to ensure that it is being done voluntarily and not by duress. But we also have to ensure that the senior citizen possess the necessary mental wherewithal to add someone's name to it. And it's something that I believe we have to do to protect our senior citizens because the cases are so many. You know, the other thing that must be done is in the instance of transfer of property. I have seen in my practice where senior citizens come to me and they say, I want to add John Brown's name to the title. I'm like, all right, fine. How do you want to add them? Tenant in common, joint tenant, and I explain. No, I want to put their name alone on it. Why? I mean, we are creatures of instruction, so we act according to instruction. But you have to stop, Senator Sinclair, and ask, why would a senior citizen want to add somebody's name to the title? Absolutely. And sometimes it's because they either have been so good to them they want to do it. Sometimes they don't even understand. As in one instance, I had to explain to the client that, you know that when you take off your name and you put this person's name, tomorrow the person can come and take you out of your house. She did not know that. So what we have to do is to have that conversation. Our organizations, including financial organizations, have to have that kind of conversation with the senior citizens to ensure they know what they're doing. And I recommend what obtains in India. In India, under their Maintenance and Welfare of Parents and Senior Citizen Act in 2007, they have a provision that says, and you would know this, Senator Gill, that says if you add someone's name, if a senior citizen adds someone's name to the title, but that person refuses to take care of that senior citizen, then the transfer is null and void. The state has the authority to make that transfer null and void. And in my opinion, Senator Dr. Morris, this, I believe, is how we need to move forward if we're really serious about the care and the welfare of our citizens. Then the other thing has to do with the legislation that we have. It will regrettably take a long time for us to bring the proposals that are being made here today and in Senator Morris's motion to fruition. But what we do have now are existing legislation that really just need a little amendment. But these amendments will go a far way. And I'm speaking specifically to provisions, for example, in the Mental Health Act, Senator Scott Motley. Because in the Mental Health Act, it stipulates, for example, when someone is in need of care, who are the persons who can apply? And under that act, the list of persons are blood relatives. The challenge is that there are times when none of those persons who are listed in that law either care or are in Jamaica. And the persons who genuinely care for that senior citizen can't apply. They cannot apply because they are not on that list of persons who can apply. And I believe that that is something that needs to be done. And so I'm making a formal appeal here that we amend the Mental Health Act to ensure that, to widen the category of persons who can apply for legal guardianship. But I also want to say that in making that amendment, that we also make it mandatory that a social inquiry report be done on the applicant. And I say that because it is easy for John Brown to apply for legal guardianship of a senior citizen, and for John Brown to get two of his friends to say John Brown is a good and a decent person, and John Brown has been caring for Miss Clark, when in fact that is not the case. A social inquiry report where the social worker goes into the community and find out about John Brown and the relationship he or she has will be helpful in ensuring that the right persons are put in place to take care of the elderly. So, Mr. President, while I fully support this motion and hopefully the short promulgation of the relevant legislation, I hasten to say that the law alone will not correct the problem. What we need is enforcement and resources. So we have the Maintenance Act of Jamaica. And the Maintenance Act, Senator Gill, stipulates that every child has a responsibility to maintain his or her parent so far as is applicable. Yeah. The Maintenance Act of Jamaica says that Janice has a legal responsibility to maintain her mommy. But the question I have to ask is, how many of such cases have been brought to the court? And of those cases that have been brought to the court, what really has been the outcome? So it is one thing, Senator Morris, to have the legislation. What we have to ensure that persons are informed and educated about the legislation is enforced, but that the resources are put in place. Now, I hasten to say, I don't believe that children just don't want to take care of their parents. I refuse to believe that, at least in the majority. What we have to do, ensuring that our children take care of their parents, is to put in place or to create an economy where children can live, where they can earn a livable wage, where they can take care of their responsibilities, and then they have sufficient, can take care of their parents. Because if we don't do that, what is going to happen is what continues to happen, where a parent, regardless of how he or she feels, a child, regardless of how he or she feels about her parent, is really going to put themselves first. So they're going to say, okay, fine, I have my children's school fee to pay, I have my car to pay, I have my rent to pay. If anything left over, I can give mommy. But some months, nothing just don't left over. So what we have to do as we contemplate showing greater care and taking greater care of our senior citizens, Senator Morris, is to ensure that we create an economy that will give support to the purpose and the intent of the legislation. Then, Mr. President, and I'm wrapping up, I believe that if we're serious about the elderly, we have to find ways to incorporate them in every aspect of our society. So Senators Gill and Crawford spoke about getting them involved in agriculture, and I support that. We need to use them more in our mentorship program. We need to use them in our values and attitude program. Listen, there's so many things that seniors can pass on. Just basic things. Good morning. Just how you dress. There was a time when boys were seen with their shirts nicely tucked into their pants. And if you ever think you can wear it somewhere else, somebody's going to grab you up and fix it for you. Just those little things, the values and the attitude, the please and the thank you. We're in this fast-paced society. Mommies and daddies don't always have the time to teach these things. This is where the seniors come in. So our values and our attitude program, our young mothers, our females and our male groups, bring them in. Let them mentor. Let them mentor the first-time mothers. Let them mentor the young mothers who have to go back to school because they became teenage mommies, but they want to pursue their education. This is where we can use our senior citizen. We use them in the programs that HEART has. We use them in our community centers to teach skills to the boys and to the girls who have either dropped out of school or who just want to learn a skill after school. This, Mr. President, is where we believe we can harness the skills of our senior citizens and we can transfer knowledge to the young ones. Mr. President, our senior citizens are the backbone of our society, and in them rest critical values, norms, and institutional knowledge and culture. Yet we often treat them as a burden. If only, Mr. President, we are determined to harness the best of our seniors and to maximize their talents and skills, then we would change the way we treat our senior citizens and we would change their fate. They would no longer see retirement or the age of 60 as being the end of their rope, but they will see it as an opportunity to be reborn, an opportunity to recommit, and an opportunity to retrain the younger generation. But for this to happen, it is going to be dependent on our mindset, supported by the legislation like what Senator Dr. Morris is trying to do today. But these legislation must be enforced and the requisite resources must be provided. And I say, Mr. President, as a child who grew up with her grandmothers and who have had the benefit of hearing and sharing their experiences, it is a motion that I completely and fully support. And Senator Morris, do accept my own congratulations for bringing this motion today in our 60th year. If it pleases you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Fraser-Binns. Senator Webby, I think you said you had a brief intervention.
Yes, Mr. President. In fact, it's going to be significantly shorter than.
No, it didn't go over 10 seconds. It was brief. Really? No, it didn't. I didn't make
You got it. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. President, I was saying that I'll be significantly shorter than Senator Fraser-Binns, and I think we need to have a definition in this House of what we mean by brief, because I've heard it many times. So, Mr. President, but it's good to see you. You're always very charming when you present. Mr. President, I rise in response to the motion moved by Senator Morris. And Senator Morris, I sincerely want to congratulate you on bringing this very important issue for discussion. I also admire the passion of Senator Crawford and Senator Gill and Senator Fraser-Binns. And like all three of you, I was in fact a product of my Grandma Fort. And I don't think I'd be here today standing in this honorable house if she did not help to raise me. So I think it goes without debate, Mr. President and colleagues, that the care and protection of our senior citizens who are a part of the vulnerable population in our society is extremely important. And Senator Morris, once again, congratulations. I want to raise a few points which I believe should be considered as we contemplate these matters raised in the motion. And I hope I don't sound like a donor with all of these presentations, but where I sit, Mr. President, in my opinion, in order to determine the best way forward to protect the rights and dignity of our senior citizens, we must begin with an assessment of the framework that we already have in place. This would help us to determine whether creating new legislation is the best approach. I'm not going to be very specific, Mr. President, but I just did a little adding up, and believe it or not, I have been in this honorable house, not continuously, for about a decade now, and time flies, and I give thanks to the various prime ministers who have appointed me. But I'm elderly or approaching there very quickly. But, Mr. President, on a serious note, sometimes I've seen in this House, we call for legislation to be passed when what we really need is a laser focus on implementing and improving the framework that already exists. This, in my opinion, should at least be the first step. Mr. President, a national policy for senior citizens was established from 1977 by the then Minister of Labour, Social Security and Sport, the Honourable Portia Simpson, who I consider to be a personal friend, a wonderful lady, a beautiful lady, a caring lady. 1997. And then in 2021, Mr. President, the Honourable Carl Semuda tabled a national policy for senior citizens as a part of our Vision 2030. And here's a lovely brochure. And I hope everybody, I went through it, not in any detail, but it is really good reading, especially in debating this motion. One of the things that jumped out, Mr. President, and it's not a criticism of anybody, but the revised policy, Senator, will be implemented over a 10-year period. So right away, as a private sector man, Senator Bunting, 10 years is more than a lifetime. So I was saying, but why so long? Having said that, I'm sure the technocrats went through and came up with the 10 years. And the only comment that I would add to that is that we must have interim review periods of that policy. Every 3 years, review the policy, and so we can revise it accordingly. The other thing that I'd like to see a scorecard, Senator Brown, a scorecard in terms of how have we been implementing the policy from 1997. And what I did not see in that lovely brochure is like a side-by-side comparison of what was there in 1997, what have we implemented, what is there in 2021, and some timelines and accounting officers to implement the policy. And I would encourage the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, if they can add that. Maybe I missed it. If I missed it, I'd ask them to send it to me. But I think in terms of this policy here from 1997, we need more color in terms of how have we been implementing that policy. Mr. President, you know, when you have a discussion with our elderly, the first thing on your mind, and it has been raised by all speakers, is about their health, whether it's the blood pressure or the sugar or anything like that. And I did an exercise in terms of my preparation for this debate, and there's a lot that needs to be done. So I went through Senator Scott Martley, I went through the annual report for the NHF, and it was raised about JDIP, an annual report for 2019 to 2020, and listen to this, colleagues. There were 862,000 beneficiaries registered, 862,797. And of the 862 registered, 419, Senator Crawford, 419,945 of them were considered active beneficiaries. In other words, less than 50% of the beneficiaries were active in the NHF. And of those that were active, only 48% of them actually accessed the NHF card during the year. So we're talking about a significant amount of our population that are registered as beneficiaries, but actually having that NHF card is significantly low. So this is what I mean by that there's work to be done. As you would appreciate, colleagues, that we need to do some data analytics on why and how we are going to fix it instead of rushing to establish a new legislation. One of the things that I would say, though, however, is that the implementation, Mr. President, of the national identification system will allow us to identify very clearly the elderly who are in need. In other words, when you're doing that analysis on the national identification system, and you have your database, and you put the database everybody over 60, and you cross-reference that to the NHF, if there are people that are registered under the NIDS and they don't have a medical benefit from the NHF, then we flag that and we engage them and say, come and register with the NHF. Because sometimes, you know, when you see some of the elderly Senator Scott Matthew that they are not well and they can't afford the drugs, it's sad, you know. It's sad. So I'm saying is that there's a system in place that we must put where the needs is now integrated with the National Health Fund, and then by exception, you engage those that are over 60. And that is not high science. The other point that was raised, and it was nicely articulated by my friend Senator Crawford and by Senator Fraser-Binns. You know, when you look at the statistics of the Financial Services Commission for those that are registered, labor in the private sector that are registered in a registered pension fund, you know that figure, Senator Brown, is only 11.48%. Can you imagine that only 11.48%, based on the regulators that are registered in a pension fund from the private? No. The private sector. No. We have a model that has been established. Let us look on it. And let us look on the tourism workers' pension scheme. Let us look on that. Let us look on that and see how we can replicate that in other growing industries. For example, when you look at the BPO, and I'm chairman of JAMPRA under the leadership of my honorable minister there, right? The BPO is growing beyond belief. So I'm saying, if we have done it and the model is there for the tourism worker, we need to establish a similar system, a similar vision for the workers in the BPO sector by having a national pension scheme for the BPO sector. And I think we need to go in that direction. And that's one model, Senator Crawford, the farmers, that's the backbone. That's what is going to save Jamaica, agriculture, agro-processing. How can we protect the farmer in the future with a pension, something that they can hang on to? The other point that I would make, Chairman, is that the whole issue of the homes, the elderly homes as we call them. You know, I've seen on the television sportsmen and women that I admired, basically worshipped as a youth growing up. I've seen them on the television without food or without somewhere to live. Can you imagine that? After they have given us so much joy and excitement in their youth, and now when they get on in age, they have nowhere to live, and some of them don't have no food. I know Babsy is looking at that, but that's one example. And I was happy to hear the passion of Desmond McKenzie, one of my favorite when he presents, where he said that over 1.4 billion has been spent during the last 5 years on infrastructure development of the poor relief and infirmary care system. He went on to say, which I found very interesting, he indicated that this has exceeded anything done over the preceding 130 years of poor relief in Jamaica. In other words, Desmond was saying it's a very, very long time. And I want to commend him and the government on that. But I think everybody would agree that when we look at the state of our, what we refer to as our old people homes, and the capacity to accommodate the old people. Some of them in the hospital because and their family leave them, and there's nowhere for us to put them. I'm saying that more needs to be done. So, for example, when you look at page 19 of this report, we talk about infrastructure development for those homes, and they're calling on the private investment or the private sector to work with them in terms of improving these homes. I'm giving a personal commitment today that we will give a commitment to improve those homes in terms of nutrition and infrastructure development. But I want to go further than that. And Minister Samuda will understand. The world of fundraising with all the technology around has changed. It It has become borderless, boundaryless. Why don't we start a GoFundMe account or system where all the Jamaicans, not only in Jamaica, but all over the world, can contribute towards improving the infrastructure of old people homes in Jamaica? That's not high science. Can you imagine that if every Jamaican, or most Jamaicans, even give a small amount of 10 US in this infrastructure development for old people homes, how that will make a big difference and make the elderly so much more happy and comfortable? So I'm calling, why don't we set up a GoFundMe account for infrastructure development for the homes of these old people? I don't think that's high science. And if everybody give up $10 US all over the world, it's going to add up to a lot. So, Mr. President, in closing my presentation, I want to summarize my thoughts on how we can secure the dignity of our senior citizens. The first one, as a first step, Senator Morris, we need to review the existing social and legislative framework for the protection of the rights and dignity of our senior citizens to ensure they are implemented effectively and efficiently and identify the gaps which needs to be addressed. That's the first thing. Let's review what we have. I've already spoken about NHF and JDIP, etc. That is the first step in my mind of what we should do. The second step is to create an ease of access to the benefits of the NHF and using data analytics, as I suggested, to drive program expansion among the elderly cohort of our population. 3, which is very important, the continued reform of the NIS to sustainably provide for the most vulnerable groups in our society, including our senior citizens during retirement. And Senator Hill, Minister Hill, I've given an example of the BPO, private sector, private expansion system, and the social system. With social pension, we need to keep reviewing that. And then the third one is the continued improvement. The fourth one is the continued improvement and expansion of the golden age homes across the island through funding from external parties. Mr. President, as I said, I'd be brief, but I really believe that if we focus on those 4 areas that I raised, it will make a difference to the elderly in our society, who are the foundation of this great country. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Webby. I must just indicate that I think that's where we intend to go today. Minister has a motion to suspend the debate, but just before I go, just wish you all a safe and happy long weekend. Those of you who are working over the weekend, have a productive one. If you are planning to lounge around somewhere, keep yourself safe. Minister?
Mr. President, I now ask that the debate be suspended for a date to be fixed.
Members would have heard the motion. Those in favor? Against? Minister?
Mr. President, given that there's no further business, your time will come about 5 decades from now. Wait. Mr. President, given that there's no other business to be discussed today, I ask that the Senate be suspended, the meeting be suspended, adjourned for a future date. Thank you very much, Senator Brown.
The question is, as put by the Minister, that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Against?